You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to more of the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and it is time once again to make some picks going into week number 14 now of the NFL. We're sitting on a record of 121-72, coming off of an okay 8-5 week. We're looking to do a little bit better this time around, and we get to kick things off with a very exciting Thursday night football matchup between the Steelers and the Patriots. So make sure you comment below. Let me hear your picks for this week. What are your thoughts on my picks? Even though I don't do betting odds, I would love to hear the betting odds you guys are going for. It's always very interesting to me to see what everyone's gauging as far as the market's looking. But we're going to dive right into it, beginning with that Thursday night football matchup I just mentioned here, as the Patriots are being hosted by the Pittsburgh Steelers in a game that I don't really know how many people are excited to watch, because we have two of the worst scoring offenses in the NFL, with the 32nd ranked Patriots and the 28th ranked Pittsburgh Steelers. This one is sure to be a low scoring affair. And what else is new when you're watching either the Pittsburgh Steelers or the New England Patriots play a football game? I think that there's probably two things the Patriots really have to focus on in this matchup if they do want to have any shot of winning that game. And the first one is pretty simple, but not necessarily the easiest thing for some teams to do, and that is protect the football. And the second thing that they have to do, which, they're pretty good for the most part, is slowing down the ground attack of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If they can't do both of those things, and I really stress that if they can't do both of those things, and I mean not just one or the other, but I think both are necessary, I don't really know what kind of a chance the Patriots have winning this game here. The Pittsburgh Steelers love to turn the football over, and they have a pretty awesome 1-2 punch in their thunder and lightning combo of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. So if you can't slow down what they're doing on the ground, and you can't prevent some of the takeaways that this Pittsburgh Steelers defense just loves to come up with, what seems like week in and week out, I'm not really too high on the Patriots going into this matchup here. There's just not a lot that really points into the direction of a Patriots win, especially being in Pittsburgh. It kind of only amplifies the situation, in my opinion. I like Pittsburgh getting the win here in a very Pittsburgh-esque 17-10 victory. Unfortunately, I don't really expect this one to be a very exciting one to watch, but it is football to watch on Thursday nonetheless. Now, moving into the early window of games on Sunday now, we'll start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being hosted by the Atlanta Falcons. The Bucs coming into this game 2-4 on the road, as the Falcons are 4-2 at home. Most of the Atlanta Falcons' success this year seems like it happens when they are playing in Mercedes-Benz, so that is something that I think is worth keeping in mind. And I think if Atlanta wants to continue to maybe find some more success at home, they need to once more focus on the ground game, get Bijan Robinson more involved here. Tampa allows only about 99 yards per game rushing, which is actually good for 10th in the NFL, but the last time that these two teams played, Atlanta rushed for 156 yards on the ground. So clearly Atlanta has some sort of mismatch or figured something out schematically that worked out really well for them, and I think they should go back to that, because again, as I've been saying, with Desmond Ridder under center here, I think if you can limit his mistakes and limit some of the poor plays he makes, you have a lot of skill players you can rely on to make plays when they get the football in their hands, and you can find some success against the Buccaneers team that offensively themselves, I mean, yeah, they've been a little bit better running the football the last 2 weeks. They've had about 126.5 yards per game, which is well above their season average of 85. But beyond that, it's an offense that just has not really been in sync, is probably the best way I can describe Tampa Bay when I watch their miscues, and just the lack of connection that sometimes we see between Baker and his receivers can just be a little bit problematic for them. It's always really tough to sweep a division rival in the season, but I do think that if ATL can just protect the football and again focus on that ground game, they have been the better team amongst these two. So I'm siding with the Atlanta Falcons on this one here. I have them winning 23-21. A few more points scored in this matchup here than the first time around when the game finished. I believe it was 16-13. Next game we're looking at is the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears, and this kind of feels like we're going to get another one of those higher scoring affair type of matchups here. The first time around that these two teams played, Chicago found a ton of success running the football. They finished the game with 183 yards on the ground, despite the fact that Detroit has one of the best run defenses in the NFL. They've allowed only about 93 yards a game so far this season, and that's good for fifth best in the NFL. So I think that a better effort through the air does ultimately lead to a potential Chicago upset. There is a path to victory. It's not like the last time these two teams played, Detroit ran away by any means. They won in the final seconds, and it was kind of it almost felt like a lucky comeback victory, all things considered, with the way that game kind of wrapped up. So if Chicago wants to win, maybe a little bit better through the air, and also trying to win on third down. They are one of the worst third down teams in the NFL on defense, allowing teams to convert on 46.1% of third down attempts. If they could just be a little bit better, keep that number under the 40% mark, I think you have a shot at upsetting this Lions team. You were very close to doing so the first time around when they played. But when you look at what the Lions have been doing, they are a good favorite going in this matchup here. Most notably, 5-1 on the road. These guys have been warriors all season long when it comes to playing on the road. And despite their random moments of stalling here or there that the Lions seem to run into at times throughout this season, their offense does continue to be one of the best in the NFL. They're 6th in points per game scored. They have the 2nd most total yards per game average this season. They can move the football and move the football at will. And when you're going up against a Chicago Bears team that, despite having a lot of success against the run, seems to just let everyone slice and dice their secondary, it's just hard for me to really settle on a Chicago Bears win here. And again, I know that Chicago had the Lions on the ropes the last time these two teams played here, but it's been quite a while since that last matchup here. The Lions have been rolling offensively. I do think that with what we've seen from Detroit's defense, that this game could wind up being a little closer in terms of score. I'm not going to say that the Lions run away by any means. I feel like they've been letting some other teams move the football a little bit more often than they'd like to see. So I have the Lions winning, but I have them winning 30-27. High scoring affair. I think this is actually going to be a pretty fun one to watch. Next, we look at the Indianapolis Colts and the Cincinnati Bengals here. This is a really interesting matchup, one that got a lot more interesting once the Cincinnati Bengals pulled off an upset victory over the Colts division rival Jaguars this past Monday Night Football. Now, big question, of course, is can Jake Browning pull off another improbable win and have even relatively close to as good of a game as he had against those Jaguars on Monday night? He went for 354 yards and a couple of touchdowns. However, I think it was notable that he was only sacked twice, and it really felt like the Jaguars had a hard time getting pressure on him. Now, you look at what Indianapolis is doing this year, completely different story. This is the 2nd best pass rush in the NFL right now in terms of getting to the quarterback. They have 42 sacks on the season. They are only 2nd to the Baltimore Ravens. That's one of the weird things that I've seen with Indianapolis this year is their defense has been fairly porous. They let teams move a lot. They let teams convert on third down more often than I think they should be. It's just a very weird thing that they have going on because they're one of the best pass rushes and they can pull out sacks at will, but their defense just cannot get stops when it needs to have happen. So I'll be curious to see how Jake Browning does against a team that can bring a lot more pressure than I do think the Jacksonville Jaguars can at times. And on top of that, Cincinnati, for what it's worth, has been a bit of a struggle protecting their quarterbacks, and that's been for the last 2 or 3 years, not just this season as well. I do think, though, that Cincinnati could double down on Jake Browning and just try to see if they can throw the football more, but I really do think that they should probably look at running the ball a little bit more in this matchup here, as when you look at what the Colts do defensively, like I said, for all the strengths that they have when it comes to winning in winning in the pass rush, they're not a great run defense. They're allowing about 133 yards per game right now, which is good for 26th in the NFL. So they can be a very, very porous defensive front when it comes to trying to stop teams and their running backs. I also do think that there is a shot with Cincinnati being a team that loves to go after the football and be aggressive on defense. The Colts are pretty mistake-prone on offense. They have 17 turnovers on the season. There is a good chance that if they can catch the Colts slipping here or there or take advantage of a poorly placed football or maybe a very opportunistic fumble recovery, something like that, there is a good chance the Bengals could win this, especially being at home. The Jungle is an excellent home field advantage, and with the high that they're running on right now over in Cincinnati, I expect that crowd to be rocking and rolling this Sunday. So I definitely think there's a shot Cincinnati could win, but I'm siding with the Colts. Their offense has just been crazily productive this year, and I do think that poor offensive line in Cincinnati, I don't want to say poor because they've kind of found themselves somewhere within the middle or to slightly below average, but I think that offensive line does have some issues against that pass rush from Indianapolis, and I have the Colts winning 27-21. Now, we just mentioned the Jacksonville Jaguars a bit, and now they, coming off the heels of a devastating injury to one Trevor Lawrence and also to wide receiver Christian Kirk, are now being hosted by the Cleveland Browns, and a Browns team that is 5-1 at home. The Browns struggle on the road, but when it comes to having people come see them in Cleveland, they are one of the best at protecting their home field. And I do think that there is a good chance that Cleveland does potentially come away with a victory here. Like I mentioned, there is no Trevor Lawrence, and of course losing Christian Kirk, I feel like that loss was overshadowed a bit, but if he's not playing as well, that only amplifies the issue in the passing game there. And the run game for the Jaguars has not really been that good. They're 22nd in the NFL right now, averaging about 103 yards per game, so not anything too crazy. And their defense, while they've been great against the run, have really struggled to stop the pass. They're the 30th ranked pass defense in the NFL right now. So there are some issues and some concerns going into this game now, especially minus Trevor Lawrence and another stud wide receiver in Christian Kirk. When you look at what the Browns do, they bring the third most pressure in the NFL right now, pressuring quarterbacks on 27.1% of dropbacks. And with CJ Beathard under center for Jacksonville, I'll be very curious to see how he handles all that pressure, because you know that if they get going, especially when they're at home, the Browns' defensive front is one of the most ferocious in the NFL and makes even some of the best quarterbacks look mortal. So this is definitely going to be a matchup that I'm watching in this game here. And now I think it's also worth mentioning, we are coming off of the Browns having the second most passing yards this season with Joe Flacco under center. I don't know if Joe Flacco found the fountain of youth or it just was the matchup last week. I'm not 100% sure. But with another week of practice and prep and allowing himself to get ready for, again, a 30th ranked pass defense in the Jacksonville Jaguars, there's a possibility that we see an even better performance from Joe Flacco. He had a pretty damn good game last week, and I'm going to be honest, I was not really expecting that when I found out that he was going to be the starter. Not at all, by any means, did I expect to see something like that. So there's a possibility he has a better game this weekend, especially if the Jaguars' offense is really struggling. I mean, he's a vet. He knows what he's doing, Super Bowl champion, so paired with a nasty offensive line and a really good rushing attack, I wouldn't be too shocked to see the Browns come away with a victory this week, and I have them winning. I think lower scoring affair. It could be maybe a little bit ugly, but 20-16, I'll take the Browns. Now, looking at the Carolina Panthers being hosted by the New Orleans Saints here, at this point, the Panthers are 1-11 and 0-7 on the road. The Saints, though, for what it's worth, are actually only 2-3 at home this year. So despite New Orleans being one of the loudest and what some people consider one of the best home field advantages in the NFL, the Saints have not really done as much as they should be doing at home with such a great home field advantage. Now, I could dive into the numbers on this here, and there is a chance, there's always a chance that Carolina could come away with a victory. And they were very close. They had the Buccaneers on their heels late in that game last week with a shot at potentially stealing away a win from that same division rival Bucs. But I do think that the Saints defense, being as great of a unit as it is, could pose a problem for CJ Stroud in what has been a very underwhelming offense this season. On top of that, Derek Carr gets knocked out of the game again, and there's this weird thing going on with the quarterback situation, and I mentioned this in my power rankings earlier this week, where it seems like fans are kind of starting to turn on Derek Carr, and they want to see more of Taysom Hill. And I will mention that it feels like when Taysom Hill is under center, you get more production out of this offense than not. And so while I'm not 100% sure what the plans are, it's still only Thursday. We got plenty of time till Sunday. Something tells me we might see some more Taysom Hill. And if we see more Taysom Hill, I think we're going to see a better output from this Saints offense. And I'm pretty confident in this Saints defense. Saints should get the game done and won. I have them winning 24-10. Would I be shocked if the Panthers somehow pull out some crazy win? No, because the Panthers' offense at times has been very bad this season. Very bad, considering the amount of talent that they have. But I also feel like this is a game the Saints should be winning, especially just all things considered between both these teams. They are a superior team, and on top of that, they're in New Orleans. Despite the lack of home field advantage they've had with their record, I think the Saints should get this one done. Now we're looking at the Houston Texans and the New York Jets here as the Jets continue on the season with one of the absolute worst offenses in the NFL that I think I have ever seen. So here's what we're looking at here. Defensively for the Jets, this will be a test for them, but it's also going to be a test for the Houston Texans offense. New York brings the most pressure than any other team in the NFL right now. They're averaging about 28% of dropbacks right now. That is ludicrous. That means like every 1 in 4 dropbacks, they're getting close to the quarterback at minimum, not to mention quarterback hits and bringing them down and stuff like that. Like they're at the very least just getting to the quarterback in some capacity. If Houston can handle the pressure, this is a very winnable game for the Texans here. When you just kind of start breaking down some of the numbers here, I mean, Houston averages nearly 10 more points per game than the Jets do. They're sitting at around 23 to the Jets 14. And on top of that, Houston's not a team that really commits a lot of turnovers. They only have 11 turnovers this season, some of the fewest in the NFL right now. And I think that you look at the struggles that the Jets have had offensively and some of the mistakes that, whether it's Zach Wilson or whether it was Tim Boyle, who has recently been released, I don't really think that you could sit here and say that the Jets should potentially come away with a victory here. Like, I know they're in New York and anything happens in the NFL, but between the quarterback situation that we've seen and just the absolute mess of an offensive line that the Jets have right now, I don't really know how you buy the Jets in any game going forward the rest of the season. Like, yes, the defense at some points has been really great, but even they've kind of started to regress in some situations. Like, they're one of the worst run defenses in the NFL right now, and it's just kind of like, it feels like all of the wheels are finally starting to fall off. I felt like you had like a blown tire and you still had 3, but now it kind of feels like you have 2 blown tires on the same side and you're just kind of dragging your car along, and it's not pretty. So I mean, yeah, is it a plus that maybe we're getting Zach Wilson under center for the Jets again? Maybe. He brings athleticism back to the quarterback spot, but overall, not a game where I really expect the Jets to come out victorious. I do think that the defense allows the game to be a little bit closer, but I'll take the Texans 20-13. The next game that we're going to look at here is going to be the Los Angeles Rams heading into Baltimore to take on the Ravens. The Ravens coming into this game at 9-3 with the Rams at 6-6. I do have a feeling that this game winds up being a little bit closer than some people might anticipate. I know the Rams record sitting at 500, not the most impressive in the world right now, but Kyren Williams is back and he has made some noise within this offense in just the last 2 weeks alone, as the Rams have averaged about 428 yards per game since his return. Now, he is going up against a really tough run defense in Baltimore. They're ranked 11th in the NFL, allowing only about 102 yards per game. And that's not even mentioning the fact that Baltimore, on top of that, with how good their defense has been, they are the number 1 team in points allowed per game at just a measly 15.5. This one, I think, ends up being closer than some people expect. And it ends up being maybe a little bit more of a defensive affair than some people might expect, even from the Rams end, because they have a young defense that has been kind of shining the last few weeks as of late, as they've really started to put things together here. But I will say that if there's one matchup I'm really keeping an eye on here and I'm really curious about, because it'll be a big test for the Rams, is going to be how their offensive line and pass protection holds up against the Ravens pass rush. The Rams offensive line last year, abysmal, and injuries largely attributed to that. You look at the way they've been this year, they've allowed only 22 sacks this season. That is good for 4th lowest in the NFL. However, the Ravens, like I said, best pass rush in the NFL. They have 47 sacks on the season. That leads the league by 5. They're right in front of the Colts, as I mentioned a little bit ago. So this will be one that I think, again, ends up being closer because the Rams offense with Kyren Williams is very clearly a different unit. It's not the same team when they have Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman running the football. It just really opens things up because Williams is such a threat in the backfield. You have to respect the run fakes a lot more. There's just a lot more that teams have to account for. And Matthew Stafford, of course, still one of the best quarterbacks I consider in the NFL right now. Obviously, the season might not be the way it might not have gone the way that this team has wanted, but they've been dealing with injuries in a lot of unfortunate places. this Rams team and this offense can definitely shoot out with the best of them. It's just a matter of overcoming this Ravens defense. And I know that there is concern with Mark Andrews being gone in Baltimore, but you still have Zay Flowers. Odell Beckham is still Odell Beckham, clearly. And you have some pretty serviceable young tight ends that can, while not replace Mark Andrews' production, at least try to supplement as much as possible in Isaiah Likely and Charlie Collar. I don't think that the Rams win, but I think they make it competitive. I have the Ravens taking the W 24-20, but do not be shocked if the Rams have the Ravens on their heels in this matchup here. This is a team that's coming to life at the right time and at the right point in the season. Now, moving into the late window here, we're going to be looking at the Minnesota Vikings being hosted by the Las Vegas Raiders as Josh Dobbs mania continues for at least one more week, this time in Las Vegas, a more fitting place I could not pick. And then we also get the return of wide receiver Justin Jefferson, a long-awaited return at that, and one that I think will help elevate this offense, not back to maybe what they were prior to Kirk Cousins' injury, but one that I think will be a huge plus in aiding Josh Dobbs as he tries to kind of right the ship out of the wrong direction they've been going the last couple of weeks here. Now, when I look at both of these teams, a big issue kind of stands out for me, and it's for both of them, really, and it kind of, in my opinion, helps me decide, not helps me, but helps me feel like whoever wins in this spot here winds up being victorious, and that's going to be in the turnover battle. When you look at both of these teams, their takeaway differential is awful. The Vikings are 29th, the Raiders are 27th. Raiders this season currently sitting on 21 total turnovers offensively, and the Vikings, don't worry, outdoing them by 3 with a league-leading 24. Whoever plays a cleaner style of football and just protects the rock, I honestly think winds up victorious in here, because I think these two teams kind of stack up fairly evenly, especially when you look at them offensively. I would give a large edge to Josh Jacobs. And then, of course, you look at the matchup of Devontae Adams versus Justin Jefferson. I would probably give the edge to Josh Dobbs over Aiden O'Connell at this point. And you have two offensive lines that are pretty even on top of that. So there's like, an advantage on either team. Wide receivers kind of match up fairly well. And I think that between the turnovers and also just kind of the trench battle is where you find that this game's going to be won and lost. Both teams are fairly close in terms of sacks forced and sacks allowed, but I will say that the Vikings do boast a far superior run defense to the Raiders, and I do think that is something that winds up being an advantage for Minnesota. It's not like either team really runs the football that effectively anyways, but just knowing that the Raiders have a much softer run defense than what we're seeing from Minnesota at least gives you a slight edge in that direction towards the Vikings. That's kind of the way I'm leaning right now. I think that Justin Jefferson winds up being a really good jolt of energy for this offense here, and I think ends up being an excellent complement to Josh Dobbs and what he can do when he's on the move. So I'm going to take the Vikings. I have them winning 21-18. Should be a good contest here. Not a super high scoring affair because, again, both offenses can be a bit mistake prone, but I do think it'll be an interesting contest and a close one at that. Next, we have the Seattle Seahawks heading into San Francisco to take on the 49ers, who, Eric Armstead aside, come in very healthy and are just absolutely rolling right now. They are a juggernaut and honestly the best team in the NFL right now. I don't really know what it's going to take to stop the San Francisco 49ers, injuries aside, and I don't really know who has it in the tank to take them out now. Obviously, there was some clear flaws, minus a few key players in Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams, but since they've gotten back, it's just right back to the 49ers just decimating teams, and they just completely demolished what a lot of people thought was the best team in the NFL going into last week. The Seattle Seahawks, they're definitely dealing with some questionables going into this one here. Some notable names that I was looking at on that injury report: Jordan Brooks, Kenneth Walker, Leonard Williams, and Jamal Adams, all listed as questionable right now, among some other guys as well. So health is definitely on the side of the 49ers, but you also just kind of look at these teams and the way they match up statistically. The 49ers are averaging about 7 points a game more. That's a whole touchdown more that they're averaging right now. And then as far as points allowed goes, the 49ers are averaging about 10 points less per game on top of that. They're the third best scoring offense and the second best defense in terms of points allowed per game. And that doesn't really bode well for Seattle. I know that they just put up 35 against the Cowboys this past week, but that game aside, they had not put up more than 29 points. And besides that 29, the rest are like 24 and less since week 3. So I don't really know how you could go into this game and really feel super confident that the Seahawks are going to win. San Fran's allowing 16 points per game right now. Just let that sink in. 16 points a game. Second best in the NFL. Second to only the Baltimore Ravens that we were just talking about a couple of games ago. 49ers don't make mistakes, and I really think that the only shot Seattle has is to try to force them into them. They need to take possessions away from the 49ers because it feels like the 49ers are scoring on like every drive, if not every other drive minimum right now, and they boast the best takeaway differential in the NFL at plus 11. It's just the 49ers losing the rest of the way is such a hard sell for me because of how well they match up against everyone and just the absolute domination that they've been showing when healthy. It really is a matter of just, are they going to be hurt going into their next game, and how hurt are they? Because if they're fully healthy, or maybe just missing one guy that isn't one of like their top players, it's going to be tough. And listen, Seattle has a shot, but I'm taking San Fran. I have them winning 30-20. Maybe Seattle finds a little bit of success on offense, but listen, the Cowboys have had a game or two here or there this season where they've let teams score more than they probably should have, and this feels like one of those examples with the Seahawks last week. I'm not really sure Seattle finds that same success against the 49ers defense that I think is a little bit more disciplined than what you get out of Dallas. Now we look at a rematch that the NFL just loves to talk about every time it rolls around, and I feel like every single time it comes up now, the 13-second game gets brought up over and over again. So here I am bringing it up for you guys because it feels like it's almost mandatory at this point. But Buffalo comes in looking to upset despite being only 1-4 on the road, and that's just a really tough sell for me because they have not been great when they're not in Buffalo, and even a couple of their losses in Buffalo were not great on top of that. However, though, there is positive light to shine on the Bills coming into this matchup here. Bills are averaging about 33 points per game in the last 2 weeks since firing Ken Dorsey, and that is fantastic for them because you're going up against a Chiefs team right now that has been struggling to put up points as of late. If you take out just the Raiders game from their last, 6 games altogether, the Chiefs are averaging a measly 16.5 points per game. 16.5. That's if you take out that Raiders game. That's a bit problematic. There is clearly something going on with the Chiefs offense right now, whether it's just guys are not on the same page. Dropped passes is obviously another thing that has been heavily spoken about this season in regards to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I definitely think that ends up potentially being something that hurts the Chiefs going into this matchup here, especially if the Bills continue to show that what they've done since Ken Dorsey was fired is actually pushing them in a positive direction, and they can start to limit some of the turnovers. Both defenses have been huge for the teams, and I think they match up extremely well. Chiefs are allowing only 17 points a game to the Bills 19 points a game, so fairly close there. We're talking a 2-point difference. On top of that, like in terms of like they're against the run and against the pass, they again both match up very evenly. Bills are 20th in the NFL against the run. Chiefs are 19 against the pass. The Bills are 8th. The Chiefs are 6th. Like there's really not a ton of difference in terms of just like yards allowed, points allowed, and just defensive production altogether from both of these teams. One thing, though, that also stands out that both these teams have kind of had trouble with is going to be turnovers. Another one of those things that I think could decide the way this game swings. When you look at turnovers, KC currently sitting at 20 on the season right now, and Buffalo's defense, 21 takeaways this season. That is tied for second in the NFL with like 2 or 3 other teams right now. There is a recipe for success and a recipe for a Bills win in this matchup here. With the current state of the Chiefs and just some of the struggles we've seen from them going up against better defenses the last month and a half or so, the Bills have a very good shot at winning this matchup. And I'm going to take Buffalo. I have them winning 24-21. This is one of those gut feeling picks. I could be wrong. I wouldn't be shocked to see KC win, especially at home. They love to win at home. It's kind of their thing. But the way these two offenses look right now, the Bills feel like they're trending in a far more positive direction, whereas the Chiefs kind of feel like they're trending in a negative direction. And I am having a hard time feeling the Chiefs right now. So give me Buffalo 24-21. Next, we look at Denver taking on LA. And this one is in LA. The Chargers hosting the Broncos and at home field, and it's probably one of the worst home field advantages in the NFL at this point. I will not be shocked to see plenty of Broncos country and a lot of orange sitting in that crowd once this game kicks off. Now, we all saw last week Russell Wilson having an excellent season up until that game against the Houston Texans, where he kind of came back down to earth, 3 interceptions, kind of threw the game away for the team. You don't obviously want to just put all the blame on one person, but those were 3 very untimely interceptions late in the game. Now, despite that, in the last 6 weeks of play, the Broncos have played a far and away better brand of football than the Chargers have, all around, from offense to defense, especially on the defensive side. Denver's defense is allowing only 203 yards per game through the air since week 7. That is a far cry of a difference from where they were earlier in the season, having a team drop 70 points on them. This defense has done a complete 180. Not to mention that the Chargers in the last 3 weeks of play have averaged a measly 12 points in their matchups. And you can attribute some of that to maybe the weather in the game against the Patriots they had last week. But honestly, even if that game isn't as ugly weather-wise as it was, I don't really know how much more points the Chargers put up in that game. They literally had 29 yards rushing in that matchup. They could not run the football to save their lives. Broncos, meanwhile, defensively, to kind of hammer this point home, have not allowed more than 22 points since October 8th. It is December 7th as I'm recording this right now and sending it out to you all. It is December 7th, October 8th. That was 2 months ago. 8 games almost. With a run game that's crossed 100 yards only once in their last 6 games, I'm having a really hard time leaning towards the Chargers in this one here. I picked the Broncos last week. They burned me a bit. Unfortunate interceptions from Russell Wilson, I feel like ultimately threw that pick for me, but I think the Broncos get a bounce back game here. So I'm heading Broncos country, 23-17 in what is a home game for the Chargers, but always feels like a home game for whoever's visiting. Now moving into Sunday Night Football, America's game of the week, my game of the week. I'm pretty sure everyone's game of the week going into this matchup here. We have Philadelphia being hosted by the Dallas Cowboys and their undefeated streak of 6-0 at home. The first matchup came down to the wire, and to be completely honest with you guys, I don't really expect this one to be very different in terms of coming down to that same very small wire. Now, here's the deal. When you look at this matchup here, I fully expect Dallas to come in guns a-blazing throwing the football. The last time they played, Dak Prescott sliced and diced the secondary to the tune of 374 yards and 3 touchdowns. Took advantage of the secondary, and they were they're a team that allows about 260 yards per game. They're 29th in the NFL. So, I mean, why not just go back to it? Go back to the well. You found success the first time. I don't really see why you wouldn't go back to it a second time. I will say, though, that going into this game here, I think a big focus should be really making sure that you've got your protection right for Dak Prescott. You have 5 sacks in that last game allowed, and I think if you protect Dak Prescott a little bit better in that game, you probably come out victorious. Like, there's a few things here or there that you could look at as far as to why the Cowboys came up short in that game. And there's a few things, but that's definitely something that was consistent throughout the game. If you can hold off the pressure, puts your offense in an even better position, and it already found a ton of success through the air. Philly, they're going to have to play perfect. No turnovers. The last time they played, no turnovers, and I think that was a massive reason why Philadelphia ended up coming out victorious despite not having nearly the offensive production that the Cowboys were having. And I also think that they need to really focus on running the football here. Dallas, they're about middle of the pack as far as run defense is concerned, actually a little bit closer to the top than the bottom. They're sitting at 12th. But I do think that running the football and focusing on possession is probably going to be what this Eagles team needs to really lean into. We've obviously seen that Dallas can move the football effectively against them, especially through the air. And the best way to keep a team from scoring and moving the football is to just make sure that they don't have the football. So I think really leaning into the run game and just trying to take advantage of a somewhat slightly above average run defense is probably the best recipe for success for the Philadelphia Eagles in this one here. However, despite how good the Eagles have been, we just saw them drop a game last week to the 49ers, and I kind of feel like they might be reeling in this one here. And especially it being at home, this kind of feels like one of those divisional series where the home team winds up winning. Philly wins the first time. This time around in Dallas, maybe Dallas wins this time. It's always difficult to beat a team twice in a season when it comes to division rivals, and I think that rings very true for the NFC East at times, especially when multiple teams are really good. I'm going to lean Cowboys on this one here. Another down-to-the-wire tight contest. I have Dallas winning 26-23. Now we dive into one of my least favorite things that the NFL has started to do, and I really hope it just goes the hell away. Monday night doubleheader. We have the Tennessee Titans being hosted by the Miami Dolphins, and we also have the Green Bay Packers being hosted by the New York Giants. And both games kick off at the exact same time. You can catch the Titans Dolphins on ESPN. You can catch the Packers and Giants on ABC and ESPN+. I literally hate this, and I cannot stress that enough. Now, the Titans coming in winless on the road. They are sitting at 0-6 going into this matchup as road dogs. And the Miami Dolphins come in 5-0 at home and showing absolutely zero reason as to why they should even potentially lose this game. Miami boasts the number 1 passing offense and number 2 rushing offense in the NFL currently, compared to Tennessee's 27th in passing and 17th in rushing. The point that I really think needs to be hammered home here, because when I was doing some digging on these two teams and just how lopsided this matchup really is numbers-wise, the Miami Dolphins at home, they averaged, for the season, this is in general, 32 points per game. But at home specifically, they average nearly 39 points a game when they're playing at Hard Rock Stadium. The Titans average about 18 points a game on the season, about. On the road, though, they're averaging a measly 11.5. I didn't look at the spread for this game, but for those of you that are betting the spread, whatever the Miami Dolphins have, they're going to cover. I would be completely shocked if this game isn't won by at least a 20-point margin. And that is why I have the Miami Dolphins dog-walking the Titans to the tune of 37-17. There has only really been one game where I felt like Miami should have won handedly and they didn't, and that was against the Raiders. And they were kind of in that whole, new head coach, Josh McDaniels fired kind of phase, and I feel like that's kind of fizzling out now, and we're kind of seeing that. But the Dolphins going into this game are massive favorites. They should be massive favorites. They're probably going to cover whatever ludicrous spread number it is that they have. Just by point average alone, in this situation, the Dolphins are averaging 30 points more a game than their opponents. That is ridiculous. You do not get stuff like that often. Those are the numbers that the nerds love to see, and I'm here for it. And then moving into our final matchup of the week, we have ourselves the Green Bay Packers being hosted by the New York Giants, and Tommy DeVito getting the nod as a starter despite the return of Tyrod Taylor was a very notable thing. I thought that was worth mentioning coming into this. The biggest question for me really is if the Giants offense can get in the end zone against Green Bay. The Giants are 31st in points per game. I know that they did have a really good game just a couple of weeks ago with Tommy DeVito under center, so maybe that does start to change a little bit. I don't really know, but the Packers are the 9th best team in the NFL in terms of points per game allowed. They're allowing just over 20 points a game right now, so they're a tough unit to score against, and they have a pretty solid defense altogether. They have a lot of really good veterans on there, some star players in multiple positions, and I don't really know if I could trust the Giants to have another one of those successful offensive performances against this Green Bay Packers defense that's kind of rolling right now, and an offense that has looked phenomenal. I will say that there is kind of like there is some sort of key to success here for the Giants. The Packers are ranked 30th in the NFL against the run this season, so if you're looking to Saquon Barkley to maybe have some success for you, should he be available for this game, that would probably be your best way of finding a victory, maybe just leading into the ground game and trying to keep the football out of Jordan Love's very, very hot hand right now. But with Evan Neal out and just boasting the most sacks allowed this season, I just don't really think passing is going to be an ideal situation, not to mention the Packers. They're the 11th best team in the NFL in bringing pressure. So while, yes, you've maybe found a little bit of success with Tommy DeVito, there are some glaring things kind of shouting at you to maybe stay away from the passing and focus more so on the ground and just trying to keep the football out of Jordan Love's, again, very, very hot hand. And I don't really know if I can take the Giants on this one here. I have the Packers winning, and I have the Packers winning kind of handedly. I really feel like the offense over there in Green Bay is really starting to hit a stride, and it's very impressive what Jordan Love is starting to put together. The young skill players all seem to be kind of working through those final kinks of being young skill players, and everyone's really starting to put it together now. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs really starting to look like veterans now, going into almost the back half of their second season. So having nearly a full 2 years under their belt as they're working with Jaden Reed as well, this is an offense that is starting to really blossom and come to life. And I think we're seeing the fruits of Mike LaFleur. Is it Mike LaFleur? I'm blanking on the Packers head coach right now. Matt LaFleur? Mike LaFleur? Someone correct me. I'm blanking on his name right now. That being said, offense is flourishing under the fruits of their head coach's labor, and I think the Packers get a very handed victory, 29-14. Correct me on the name, Mike LaFleur, right? I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now. 29-14. Give me the Packers with the W, and that is my picks for week number 14 of the NFL. Again, as always, I invite you, comment down below. Let me hear your picks, your thoughts on mine. Share some of your betting odds. I always love to read them and see what you all are thinking about. But that is it for me. I appreciate it if you made it to the end of the video. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.